Yeah, I guess I always wanted to become an illustrator. One of the key moments in my life was when I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, and my mum bought me my first Tintin comic book, and it was a Christmas present. And I read it in the same night, and since then I've been hooked on. I wanted to become an illustrator. I wanted to draw stories, and so I've been. My father's an arts teacher, and he was my first teacher basically, and he taught me how to draw, and he always encouraged me to draw on location. What I didn't want to do at the beginning, because I just wanted to draw superheroes and action comic books, but it didn't work out. So I followed my father's good advice, and I studied graphic design in Pforzheim. It's a small city in the southwest of Germany, in the Black Forest, and I did a lot of drawing there too. Lots of drawing on location. I did a diploma there in 1990 something, and I went to Hamburg and did drawings in the Reeperbahn, on the Reeperbahn, the red light district. I did lots of drawings in bars, tattoo parlors, in the street, in the Salvation Army, and I think I did a really good book, and I got great marks from my teachers, and so I went to the book fair in Frankfurt and tried to get my first commissions. I saw lots of art directors there and editors, and they all told me, yeah, it's great work, we love it, you'll hear from us, and I never heard of them again. So I was really frustrated, and I didn't draw for probably 2 years, and I just took on the first graphic design job that I could get, and I was doing this for 2 or 3 years. And then a friend of mine, he got a scholarship to study dual masters at the School of Visual Arts in New York, and he encouraged me to apply for a scholarship, because in the illustration program they also did a lot of drawing on location, and they're really kind of encouraging the students to go out and draw on the spot. So luckily I got a scholarship to go there, and I went there from 2000 to 2003, and did lots of drawings in New York, in the city, and in the 5 boroughs. I moved then to, during my studies there, I got my first commissions from The Guardian, and in 2003 I moved to London and got larger commissions from The Guardian, and this is a series I did for the redesign of The Guardian. They asked me to do double spread pages, a series of double spread pages for the G2 supplement, and they just asked me to do drawings of people who are not famous people or famous personalities. They're just people whose lives are kind of connected to current affairs, and they gave me a lot of freedom. So one of the people I did was Peter Herbert. He used to be the guy on Bethnal Green Road who sold me the fruit and vegetable, and he told me his story, and I did a couple of these drawings. And this is Ghalib Khan. He's a halal butcher in Bradford. I got this commission after the terror attacks in London on the 7th of July several years ago, and he asked me to go to Bradford to meet an older person from Bangladesh or Pakistan who kind of wasn't born in the UK but spent a lot of his life there. So I met this guy and threw him in his living room. And she's a doctor, she's a specialist in flu epidemics, and this was during the bird flu epidemic. And this was a great series to work on, but I always thought I want to have more space than just a double spread page. And then during this time, I went to France, I went to Paris on a weekend holiday, and I discovered a magazine there. It's called 21, and it's a great magazine. They use a lot of illustration, and at the end of each publication, they've got a 30-page reportage graphic novel. And when I saw this, I immediately contacted the editor of the magazine, and I had my portfolio with me, and they told me I should come by and see them. They liked my work, and they gave me the first small commissions. And after a while, I wanted to go to Iran on a trip, on a 3-week trip to work, to meet a person I find interesting and do a story about. And I suggested this to the editor of 21 magazine. And he told me I should definitely do one of these 30-page reportage stories. So I decided to meet a truck driver there and travel with him through the country. His name is Mazi, and he invited me to join him on this journey to, from Tehran to a small island in the Persian Gulf. And he had to go to Damavand. Damavand is a mountain in the mountains north of Tehran, and there's a big a source where they fill up water, and they fill the water into the bottles, and they ship it around the whole of Iran. So what I love to do is I don't draw any spectacular things, but I love little details. So the first morning when we arrived in the bottling plant, Masi, we were a little bit early, and he was making tea, and I just liked the idea of depicting him, the several steps he takes to make his morning cup of tea. And he bought a sack of walnuts, because he lives in the desert in the south of Iran, and they don't have walnuts down there, so we stopped in a shop and he bought a whole bag. We were driving through Tehran. We left Tehran, went on the motorway. They've got a special motorway. Iran has the highest, I think it's the worst country when it comes to fatalities and road accidents. So they've got the special motorway just for the trucks. Yeah, we were in the south now. We're in Jaroum. It's a town in the middle of the desert, and this is the place where Masi and his family live. So the whole trip was 4 days, and we spent one afternoon there. So I met his family, his wife, his kids, and had lunch with them. And this is basically the end of the journey where he delivers. Yeah, I didn't tell that. We had to drive through the whole country to a small island called Kish, and in Iran it's a famous holiday resort, and basically had to drive down the bottled water to this island, so tourists can drink the bottled water. And this is the last page where he goes back from the island on the ferry, and he's chatting with the Kurdish truck drivers he met on the ferry. So this was the first story I did for 21 magazine, and they were interested in me doing another story. So 2 years later, I went to Laos, where I met Bertrand Bouchard. He's a young veterinarian, and he's looking after elephants that are working in the logging industry in Laos. And I spent a week with him, enjoyed him and his small team. And we went into the mountains and in the jungle to remote logging camps. Yeah, he's working for a small French NGO. It's called, it's not the Elephant Family, it's Elephantasia. And they're dedicating their time and their expertise to look after these elephants that are still working in the logging industry. And I loved meeting these old, the mahouts. Mahouts are the guys who are working with the elephants. And luckily, Bertrand, he speaks Lao, he speaks the language of the people there, so whenever I had questions, I could ask him to interpret for me. Yeah, and at the end of this mission, we got invited by the mahouts for a basi ceremony. It's an old traditional thing where they thanked the elephant doctor and his team for the efforts in looking after the elephants, and that's one of these times where they all get totally drunk, the mahouts and the guests, and this was a great experience. And in Laos, they also use the elephants in the tourism industry. So we went to one resort that uses the elephants, that offers elephant safaris for mainly French tourists. we went to a sawmill because one of the elephants working there got bitten by a snake. And now Bertrand is going back to on the ferry, on the boat to Luang Prabang, where he's based. Okay, and what I need to say is the drawings you've seen so far, they were not done on location. I used a photo reference that I took on these trips. And there was a time at my career where drawing on location wasn't enough for me anymore because I wanted to get in more details into the drawings, and I also wasn't happy with many of the likenesses I did. So I started to use photography, and I also didn't want to, when I go on a trip, I didn't want to draw all the time because I wanted to go out and see as much as possible. But I got an assignment from a Swiss magazine, it's called Reportagen, and they asked me to go with a German-Italian journalist to a small town close to Naples to do. The journalist was researching a story about a mafioso or an ex-mafioso who was in a witness protection program. And he met him before, the journalist met him before twice, and basically the editor of the magazine asked me to do drawings observing kind of the interactions between the journalist and the mafioso. And Luigi, the mafioso, he lives with his family in a small apartment flat in a high-rise building with a view over the sea. And I enjoyed doing these drawings because we were a whole week in the flat, in the apartment, and I could draw on location again. I did some of the drawings from photos, but I did most of the drawings in the flat, drawing from what I saw. This is a drawing of Paola, it's Luigi's wife. She's this kind of typical Italian woman, housewife, can you imagine? And she was always making great dishes. And so we usually went into the apartment in the morning at 8, 9 o'clock. We had breakfast in the hotel, but we had lunch and dinner always in his house, and were kind of great experiences because this is the guy. He's got two kids living with him too, and his wife. And if I wouldn't have known what he did during his career as a mafia boss he's from the Calabrian mafia, from the 'Ndrangheta. I wouldn't. He's a very kind of a outgoing, very nice, kind of a humble character too, and. He got interviewed in Italian by the journalist, so I didn't understand everything what he told, but it was kind of an intense situation for me drawing in this flat, because he's also, since he's been in this witness protection program, lots of his former associates got imprisoned for many years, so they want to kill him to get their revenge, and. So it wasn't, we were told it could be a dangerous situation, that someone might come into the house and wants to do something to him, but yeah, obviously nothing happened. And this is, for example, this is the house plant. They've been in this program for several years already, and this plant was a present from Paola's parents. They gave it to them already when they're still in their old house when he was still a mafioso, but they always, whenever they had to move house, they always took the plant with them. So sometimes they got to leave overnight. So a police car comes and they take all their their most important things, but this plant always needs to travel with them. And yeah, it's a Catholic family, so they've got in the kitchen they had a calendar of the Pope, and the man here is the uncle of Luigi, and he was to be his kind of role model. He grew up in this environment where, as a kid, he already got trained to become a mafioso, and yeah, when he got into prison, he basically had to take over his role, and after a while he noticed that he doesn't want, because if he would have gone into prison or if he would have killed his young son, would have had to take over his post in the mafia. So he decided to leave the mafia and go into the Swedish protection program. The problem is now that he's not free. He's a wanted man by the mafia. That's the living room, his bathroom, and he's from a town called Crotone, and this is a towel of the local football club. And his wife, she supports Juventus Turin, so they always have these little rivalries in football. And yeah, it was in February when we were there, and he usually never leaves the house because he's worried that someone might kill him. But it happened a couple of weeks before we went there. They had a lot of snow in the town, so the whole family went out and they made a snowman. And Luigi showed me the photo on the mobile phone of his kids and the snowman. And he's got two TVs in his flat, and they were always running. And his son, he loves to play computer games like probably every other kid his age, and he's fascinated by this one computer game. This one computer game is called Hitman, and I found it quite interesting because there's a contract out of it on his dad, and he told me, actually, Luigi told me that it's not a question if I'm going to get killed, the question is when I'm going to get killed. So his son, he loves to play these Hitman games, so it's kind of interesting thing. And then it was also when we were there, the Pope kind of resigned from his post, and we saw that on the TV. And there's the scene of the lunch we had. Yeah, and his daughter, she loves the Smurfs. They're called the Puffettas, or the Puffy in Italian. So she had these mustard glasses of the Smurfs on it. There's the son playing again on his PlayStation. It's a view from his house. He spends a lot of time on the balcony smoking. And okay, we go from Naples now to Dumi's refugee camp in Iraqi Kurdistan. I got invited by Médecins Sans Frontières, the Doctors Without Borders, to do drawings about people I met in the camp. So they asked me in December last year to go there for 2 weeks and spend time with the refugees from Syria. And yeah, they basically asked me to do drawings that will get published in magazines and newspapers to raise awareness of the situation and the circumstances of the refugees. And this is Mohammed. I met him one morning. He's got a tea stall in front of the gate of the camp, and I had to wait there in the morning for my translator, and he was late, and it was a really, really cold morning, and he just saw me standing there and kind of stepping around being cold, and he just came to me and he offered me a cup of sweet instant coffee, and he smiled at me. And obviously I don't speak his language. He doesn't speak any English, and he gave me the coffee, and it did me good. And when I wanted to pay him, he didn't want any money for it. And finally, when my translator arrived, I asked him if I can interview him. And he told me that he and his family, they used to live in Damascus. And because of the war, there was, in the area where they were living, the Free Syrian Army moved in, and they were fighting against the government. And so one day they could hear a helicopter approaching, and they all just had time to leave the house, and then they could see how the helicopter dropped a bomb on the house, and the house got totally destroyed. So they lost everything, and so they just took the next bus and went to the Kurdish part of Syria, where they're from, in the northeast, yeah, and they could stay a while with the family of his wife, but because they've got a large family and the situation there is very bad in this part of the country. There's no work around anymore, so they had to leave, and they left for Iraqi Kurdistan. They had to cross the border in the night, and now he's an older guy, and he's got health problems, and he finds it very hard to make a decent living, and it's a problem for him because he's the provider of the family, and he's got many daughters, and his traditional role is basically to look after the whole family. But he hardly makes any money because he's got health problems, and he doesn't make a lot of money with the tea store. And this is a barber. What fascinated me in the camp was that they had lots of little shops, and so also lots of barber shops. And this guy told me he had to leave Damascus because his brother was serving in the Syrian army, and the Free Syrian Army, they told him that if his brother doesn't leave the army, they will come and kill him. So he decided to leave the country and go to the refugee camp. And I told you that I work from photos that I take on location, and so when I come back, I look at all the material I've got and make these little mini sketches that I send to the art director of the magazine or the newspaper I'm working for to get the approval, and then I obviously also write the stories of the people I met out to them, and then I usually get the go-ahead and work done. There's a guy, he's a TV mechanic. He repairs television sets in the camp. He's also from Damascus. And if I can quickly tell, he wanted to become an artist. He wanted to become an illustrator. But he wasn't allowed because he's from the Kurdish part of Syria, and the Kurds were discriminated. And he actually won a scholarship to go to Italy, to Bologna, to study there for a while. But he couldn't go because he's Kurdish. And I think I've got to stop now. Yeah, that's it.